welcome back to another live stream, The Art of Advocacy. I'm your host, Dr. Sheldon L. Eakins, also host the Leading Equity podcast as well. Guess what today is? Today is my birthday. The big 4-0. That's right, I said it, the big 4-0. All right, people keep asking me, you got a new decade. 40 is a big number. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do today. All right. See this right here? I love Zelda. Okay, I love Zelda. I will be playing Zelda later on today with the kids. I'm probably gonna barbecue as well. Because those are like two things I love: gym, barbecue, Zelda. That's how I'm gonna celebrate the 40. No, but seriously, I will be I'm gonna do some skydiving. That's the goal. The bucket list thing is I want to safely skydive at some point. So that's the goal. But feel free, folks. Say hello. Welcome those who are watching. I see Rob. Dr. Rob is here. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Rob. I always appreciate you as well, and your emails and the insight that you provide as well. Let's get into slides because again, I want to celebrate in a right after this. I'm going to be celebrating. So appreciate that, Dr. Rob. Yeah, today's a big birthday, man. It's people keep asking me, how do I feel? I don't know. It feels like I'm 40. Believe this or not, I'm in the best shape of my life, probably in the best health of my life ever. So I'm very blessed. I'm thankful for that. So we're going to pull up the slides. This is week 6. Can you believe that we have gone 6 weeks in a row? Or this will be week 6 when it comes to the sense of belonging. This actually, as I was kind of preparing, believe this or not, I've actually have presented basically 2 chapters of the book that I'm writing. And so today, as I was looking at the content, as I was looking at my research and everything I'm putting together, I realized this today actually wraps up another chapter. So that's 2 chapters. If you were to go back into, I mean, it's not going to be in the same organization, and there's obviously there'll be more to it, but as far as the presentation and webinars go, this has really been helping me with putting the book together. But yeah, today would wrap up a chapter. So today is how did we get here, why things like exclusion exist. I'm a history person, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of history stuff in addition to some strategies at the end, because I'm not one of those people that a fan. I'm not a fan. I'm really not a fan of all these bad stats and the world and dire and education sucks and all. It's just not my thing. It's just not. That's not my strategy. It's not how I go about things. I do like to try to point things out and say, hey, there's where we're at, or maybe so here's a perspective that you didn't consider or think about. However, I don't want to be like, I don't want to be one of those negative type of dudes, right? That's just not my style. So we're going to present some stuff. After we present, we're going to come back with some strategies. I think that's very important. So if you follow the shows, you know how I get down. So let's bring it up. As always, order your copy of my current book, Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students. You can grab that and shoot me an email or put it in the chat if you have some sense of belonging topics that you would like for me to cover. I can't promise because I am, but more than likely, I will probably touch on it at some point. I've had a few people have had some suggestions, and I'm like, yep, that's on the list. It's already, I'm putting it out. So, but feel free to pop it in the chat or shoot me an email later, Sheldon@leadingequitycenter.com. As always, this is a brave space. Again, I sometimes I get preachy, sometimes I start get going, and I say some things. Here's the thing. I'm not going to jump on you if you have a comment that differs on any of my thoughts or opinions or any of those kind of things. I like to know where folks are coming from. So if you disagree with something, totally fine with me. I'm not going to give you a hard time. I might say some things that you may disagree with. Please let me know. Let me know. Okay. All right. We're going to start with how did we get here? We're going to discuss exclusionary practices in schools. And then we'll wrap things up with shifting into a sense of belonging culture. That is the theme of the book. Everything here. And we'll bring up the formula in just a moment. But that's it. So let's start with how did we get here? Let me ask you a few questions. I'm gonna ask you a few things here. Now, as long as I've been in education, almost more than 15 years at this point, been in education in some capacity. And as a result, I mean, you hear certain terms, you hear certain topics, you hear a lot of statistics. And I'm going to ask you some questions. All right. Have you heard this before? Okay. Black, brown, and Native American students perform academically at lower rates than their counterparts. We hear this a lot, the achievement gap. And y'all know I'm not a big fan of that term, the achievement gap, because it doesn't tell the whole story. Okay, if you just look at standardized testing, you just look at those scores, then oh yeah, look, this group of folks, they're performing less than the other group of folks. I'm not about that life, because again, it doesn't tell the whole story. All right. Or I want to throw something out at you as well. How about this? Okay. Our Black and brown students are underrepresented in our school programs. We hear this a lot, right? We hear the conversations about the lack of representation in our honors courses or AP classes, or maybe even our international baccalaureate classes, even in our schools. All right. And I'll touch on that in just a moment as well. All right. And then the other one that we hear a lot is our teachers of color are underrepresented in educational leadership administrative roles. We're not seeing a lot of Black principals. We're not seeing a lot of brown principals, administrators. Right? Seems like our Black males, which represent, I believe, 3% of education, are all, the only positions they get are deans or, some sort of athletic director and those kind of things. All right. So we hear a lot of these conversations. But here's the thing. What people don't often talk about is how we got there. Why is it that a lot of our Black, brown, and Native American students perform academically at lower rates than their counterparts? Or why is it our Black and brown students are underrepresented in our school programs, such as honors, gifted, and talented, but overrepresented in our special ed program? Or why is it, again, our teaching force does not reflect the demographics of our students at the end of the day? We don't always talk about how history has impacted the way things are, right? And has made it a reality of where we are in our educational system. It is not an accident. It is not post-COVID. This is way before that. Okay, these things about these conversations aren't new. This was very intentional. Okay, if we look at it from a historical standpoint. Okay. Well, Sheldon, what do you mean? What do you mean when you talk about this is intentional and historical standpoint? Well, I'm glad. I'm glad y'all asking these questions, because I think these questions are very important. Because again, we could talk about statistics and see why things are that way, but when we go back to how our educational system was set up, it wasn't set up for everybody. Let's keep it real. It wasn't set up for everybody. All right, so let's dig into this for a second here. One of the things that I do is anytime I do an equity assessment, because people will tell me, oh, we don't have any problems. I say, all right, they'll bring me out to their school and I'll work with their school, their district, or whatever it is in a larger capacity. And we take a look at different areas within their systems. We look at their mission, vision, and belief statements. We look at their leadership. And the structure of leadership. We look at professional development. We look at recruiting. We look at representation. We look at our communication and feedback strategies. There is a piece within our professional development and within my assessment that I provide that asks 4 very intentional questions. They're very intentional. Question number 1 is, staff members within our organization are provided with opportunities to do the work of identifying their implicit bias. Okay, that is very important. Are our staff members provided those opportunities? Okay, because if we don't start with ourselves, we're going to miss out. Right. And I'm a big proponent of self-awareness. How can you do equity work if you have no idea where you are personally coming from? Okay. The next question that I ask, and this is very, again, intentional and very important. Our staff is aware of the social and historical context in which our organization operates. fill in the blank, our school, our district, our department operates. Why is it important that we know the historical context behind our schools? We have to keep in mind that our generationally, how a parent, a guardian, a grandparent, great grandparents, how they experience school does in fact impact our students, especially if they are under their direct care. A lot of our students live with their grandparents. A lot of our students live with their great grandparents. That's not uncommon. Their aunt, their uncles. This is a situation that we see, and how those parents interacted with their school and their educational experience does make a difference. If our school was once certain demographics, predominant demographics, and that has shifted over time, over generations, that makes a difference. It's very important that our staff understands and has some background information regarding the historical context that could include underrepresentation, disenfranchisement, or mistreatment. I should say, and or mistreatment. Okay. How about this? Our staff are educated on the concepts of bias and discrimination and their potential impacts on the educational system. Again, how do we go forward if we don't know where we're starting from? We're all on a journey. Specific types of bias and discrimination may impact an educational system setting, including colorism and microaggression. Sometimes we don't talk about colorism. People think that colorism isn't a thing. I challenge anybody that feels that way, because when we think about how it's unfortunate that our lighter skin students or our darker skin students are treated differently. Often those things happen. Okay. When we think about what literacy looks like, going back to the historical context, and when we think about who was allowed to be able to read, uh, at the end of the day, with technology, and at the end of the day, when it comes not only technology, but just a lot of things, when it comes to literacy, those are very important. Okay. We live in an age of tech. I was just talking to my own children. I was like, look, I didn't grow up in the cell phone age. We didn't even have flip phones when I was in grade school. Okay. Again, today's my birthday. So y'all know I'm 40. Right. But during those times, we had pagers, we had beepers, right? That was the thing. Technology has changed. It moves a lot quicker. So the way we critique, the way we synthesize and construct knowledge, it's a lot different than it was. But our educational system is still the same since the Industrial Revolution. Okay. The last question that I ask is, our organization supports asset-based pedagogy by motivating staff to acquire the knowledge and dispositions that will allow them to build on students' assets. Okay. In other words, we are willing to take our students where they are. We're willing to meet them where they're at. And when we meet them where they're at, we embrace them as talents. I can't say it enough. It's so important that whether a student is in the 6th grade and they're reading at a 3rd grade level, they can read. That's important. How do we build upon that and view it as an asset? Let's see. James said, and our demographics have, I'm assuming that, have changed. Yeah. Those things like not only have our class, just our classrooms look different. Our classrooms look different at the end of the day. All right. For years, let me pull this up so you can see. For years, education has been used to oppress. Well, how has it been used to oppress, Sheldon? Let me tell you. Okay, we talked about the embracing culture. Quotations there. Embracing culture. Assimilation. You have to fit within this mold. This is what a typical student is supposed to be like. Forget your cultural background, forget all that, what language, identities, all of that. Forget all that. This is put that at the door. When you walk through our school doors, that doesn't matter. Okay. You need to, in order to be loved and in order to be a part of our school community, you need to be assimilated into the embracing culture. The other way, segregation. Brown versus Board of Education. And the sad thing about this, all of this, when we talk about assimilation, especially with our Native American community, right? The boarding schools. We talk about separate but equal and segregation and Brown versus Board of Education. That was like just over 60 years ago, just barely, right? So we're not that far from that era, couple generations. Okay. That unfortunately is again, is still prevalent in our school system today. Our schools are still segregated. Okay. Um, I know I did an interview with, and I can't remember his name at the top of my head right now, but I did an interview in regards to what happened with Brown versus Board, right? So our schools are integrated, and as a result, a lot of our black teachers lost their jobs, right? Because with the integration, a lot of the white parents didn't want their kids to be taught by black teachers. So there's a lot of pressure on principals and administrators. So a lot of our black teachers lost their jobs, and as a result, where they end up going, a lot of them ended up going to work on the reservations. Right, but again, that's not always talked about. Right, but we still see our schools are highly segregated. How? Well, you got white flight. You got we have charter schools that are some of our charter schools are very selective, entrance exams and placements and very competitive to get into. You have a lot of private schools. All these kind of settings impact what our school classrooms demographics look like. Okay. When we think about going back to the achievement gap, and I always am, again, not a big fan because we don't always talk about the opportunity. But when we think about which schools have highly qualified and experienced teachers, have the technology, have all the resources necessary, we know that it's inequitable. We know that. So even 60 plus years after Brown versus Board of Education, we see our schools are still segregated. Redlining also is another proponent of it. Okay, let's go into exclusionary practices in schools. Okay, what are some? I guess you could look at it as some things that we do, right? Well, let's talk about it. One thing that we do, and I'm a victim of this, is failing to decenter ourselves. Okay, now I was one of those teachers. I was used to being taught where the teacher stands in front of the class, the whole sage on the stage, teacher does their lecture thing. They give us the information that we're supposed to learn, and then they ask for that information back via a test, quiz, exams, whatever, homework. Right? Those are ways that they expect us to do it. However, we need to change our mindset and move into a more decolonial mindset. So if we're trying to decenter ourselves as an adult, as educators, as human beings, we need to consider, okay, am I doing all of the heavy lifting, if you will? Because school is for the kids. It's not for me. Yeah, I have standards. Yeah, I have benchmarks and all those kind of things. Some things we can't get around. And even I would say, a lot of us as educators, we have a lot of similar identities for our students, and we feel like, okay, well, I can identify with a lot of my students, and so as a result, I know what they need. Or we have that mindset of, my kids can't do this, and so I'm just going to give them what I know that they can do. Right? Instead, We need to co-learn or co-teach, right? Learn from our students just as much as they're learning from us. Otherwise, we're excluding them in that process, in their own learning process. Another thing that we do, some people don't think about how important or detrimental, if you will, and exclusionary, if you will, when it comes to allowing kids to sleep in class. Okay. Oh, well, I mean, honestly, a lot of us will say, well, it's easier if Johnny is sleeping than if he's awake. However, those are some practices that are exclusionary. And often we see a disproportionality when it comes to who's sleeping in our class. Okay. Are we spending all of our time, for example, maybe um, chasing folks down with taking off hoodies, and hats and all that, which has absolutely nothing to do with their academic performance, the way someone's dressed. But I digress. Another one is something to consider when it comes to exclusionary practices is we have to keep in mind that everything a child does is some form of some form of communication. So that means that if we aren't paying attention, we may miss that message. What is a student trying to tell us when they are sleeping in class? Are they telling us that class is not engaging? Are they telling us that maybe they worked 2 shifts last night? All right, but there's whatever form of communication that's out there that our students are displaying. Okay, the way they walk into your class, the way that they move. When we talk about having a social emotional learning lens, right, that's a check-in. See how students walk into our classroom. Do they seem like they're smiling? Do they seem like they're in a good mood or not? Do they look tired? Do they look hungry? Do they look frustrated? That might set the tone for the class period, right? We don't always have the time to pull kids to the side and ask them how their day is going. But if we can find ways to check in with our students in between transitions, maybe, or just, a brief little moment, just to kind of give them a little eye contact and say, hey, you good? Like, quick one, those kind of things. But everything that a child does is a form of communication. Let's talk about shifting into a sense of belonging. As always, the formula is very simple, very simple. 3 things that every student must have in order to have a sense of belonging at their school. They must feel accepted, included, and supported. So, how do we decenter ourselves? Because I think that's really important. Okay. When we're thinking about what it looks like when when we hold all the power, as let's say you're in a classroom and you're a teacher, right? So we had to keep in mind about the compliance versus communication. If I'm in power and I ask my students a question, am I going to get the answer? A truthful and honest answer. I mean, think about it from your position as an adult. Let's say your boss is your principal, or let's just say you're working in a position where you have a supervisor. And we don't want to hurt our supervisor's feelings, or maybe they have not created a space in order for us to feel comfortable to tell the good, honest truth. They say, how am I leading? Or how was that staff meeting last week? Oh, yeah, it was great. Good job. Maybe deep down inside, we don't think so. A lot of our students feel the same way. They may not feel comfortable with sharing. You know what? Uh, honestly, I didn't like the class last week. Or honestly, I don't like the class at all. Well, I don't think we have a good relationship. Students aren't going to may not want to tell you that kind of stuff because they know, well, if I say something, my teacher may retaliate and I might fail this class. Or I might fail my next test. And I need to do well in order for me to get scholarships or be able to qualify for this or qualify for that. So if I ask how their day is going, for example, I might be well intentioned. However, because I hold a certain level of power, is that student going to tell me the truth? Going back to the idea of when we teach in a certain way where it's like, this is the rules. I'm your teacher. I'm telling you what you need to learn. And then there's no participation beyond just taking notes or soaking up all the information that we're instilling upon our students. And we're not learning from them. It's not a collaborational style that can cause challenges, which leads me to my next point. We need to allow our students to check us. What do you mean by check? That's being rude or disrespectful. Well, here's the thing. I learned this a couple years ago. The just a simple phrase of saying, I invite you. Very simple. I invite you, students, if you disagree or if you need more time, if you don't like this assignment, if you don't like how the class is going, I invite you to share with me. Creating that space for our students to know or feel comfortable with, hey, teacher, let me talk to you. I have some concerns with regards to the content, or I would love to. Wouldn't it be cool? Or do you mind? Or could we add in this or that? I just read this book at home. Could we bring it into the classroom? Now, if you notice, I put in your body language is important, right? Because we can say this all we want. I invite you, or we can put it in our syllabus. It says, please, I really value your feedback, blah, blah, blah. We say these words, but how does our action reflect those words? Is our body language in in sync? Is our body language in sync with what we say? If a student calls us out and says, hey, teacher, I'm not a fan of this. Are we crossing our arms? Is our body language shifting? Are we huffing and puffing? Even though we just said, oh, we invite you and all these things. But are we able to, again, do what we say? Actions literally can speak louder than words. The last one we had to keep in mind is reality is relative. That's right. Reality is relative. What does that mean? All right, here's the thing. Our schools are in communities. Now, a lot of us do live in the communities that we're serving. Some of us do not. We could live literally 2 doors down from one of our students. We could share the same racial identities, the same gender, those kind of things. But what goes on in their home is going to be different than what goes on in your home. So even if we live on the same street or share similar backgrounds, their lived experiences and reality is not going to be the same as yours. Now, why is that important? Well, at the end of the day, our students will opt into learning if somehow we can demonstrate that what we're teaching can help them craft a better reality. Not only that, is if we're able or mindful or in tuned to what our students are what they care about, what they like, and their interests. Not only that, but a lot of our students will be more engaged if their learning allows them to do something for people that they love. I always look forward to when my kids were younger. They had Father's Day or certain gift, like the teachers would have the students have my kids put together some sort of arts and crafts. They do it for their mom, they do it for me, right? Because and I see how the kids go all out on these projects because they're doing something for somebody that they love. If I'm doing something for my community, I'm bringing in a project for the students to do, and it's for the community. They love their community. They love their neighborhood stores. There are certain, the clubs or organization that they go to after school, and they're doing something to support them. Yeah, they're gonna enjoy that. But sometimes people will stop at the idea of, well, I have similar background as my students, so I know what they need. But again, there's not that participation from our students. We have to collaborate with them as well. All right. Final thoughts before I go celebrate my birthday. Final thoughts. I can't believe I'm 40 years old. Hang on a second. Let me take a sip of water here. Maybe I'm getting old because I need water. But my final thoughts here. Here, let me bring this up. Because people will tell me, "Oh, I don't know how to connect with my students, or it's just too much work, and all these kind of excuses." People will study for hours trying to find the perfect cookie recipe, but then they have, oh my god, I can't read. But then they want to have one conversation with you to figure out how to reach the community they serve. They'll put in the effort and time. They'll go down a rabbit hole on some YouTube. They'll go down a rabbit hole on various channels and do all the studying and find out this information. We put in effort in the things that we care about. We put in effort and find the time for the things that we care about. So if we're not putting in that time to learn from our students and find out what they like at home, or again, collaborating with them instead of just being the sage on the stage, then we could be missing some opportunities. Well, folks, that's all I have for you today. Happy birthday to myself once again. If you have a sense of belonging topic that you would like to discuss, or have me discuss rather, let me know. Let me know. This actually completes one of the chapters of my book. So if you're just joining us, I mentioned that earlier. As I am going along the road of putting a book together. It's been fun. Let's see. James says, give students credit for what they already know. Absolutely. Absolutely. Give students credit for what they already know. Asset-based mindset. Sounds simple. But here I am. I got to say it. Dr. Wright, I see you here. Thank you for joining us. Great points to ponder. I appreciate you, Dr. Wright. Always good to see you as well. Remember the words. Remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice leading equity.